Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to our Ixalan pre-release primer. Now, if you've seen these primer videos in the past, you know these are geared more for newer players. Maybe you've never gone to a pre-release before and you're curious as to what you should bring with you, or perhaps you just want to know generally what's going to happen, what's the experience like. We're going to talk about that today. Also, if you didn't have a chance to take time to look at like every single card that's going to be in the Ixalan set, we are going to talk high level about the set. We'll discuss the mechanics and maybe some of the synergies you can look for in your sealed pool. Now, quickly before we get started, if you're looking for a way to help support the channel, you'll find a few in the description below. Our Patreon page is linked there. We're actually really close to our next goal. Also, you'll find some product links for Amazon. If you make any purchases on Amazon, once you go through one of those links, no matter what it is, we'll get a small percentage back. And you'll also find Flipside Gaming linked below. They provided a promo code for a discount for our viewers, which was really awesome of them. They're doing pre-orders right now, actually, for Ixalan as well as Iconic Masters, so you can check that out. That also helps the channel, too. So with that being said, let's get into today's information. And we'll begin with the big question. What should you bring? If you've never gone to one of these things before, what do I need to take with me? Well, here's a few suggestions just right off the top of my head that are important. First off, it sounds simple, but a pen. Pen and paper, but especially a pen, is probably the most important thing you can bring. And the reason I say that is a lot of card stores are going to have you register for the event. You might have to fill out a form. And if that's the case, then you need a pen. And you might get stuck either having to track one down, borrow one, wait in line for one, or worst case scenario, even buy one. A lot of stores will sell pens at these events, and you don't need to be buying a pen at a pre-release. So just bring one with you. Paper is good to have too for a few other reasons. First off, you can keep track of life totals, and even though you are going to get a spin down die that keeps track of your life total if you want to use it in the pre-release kit, it's nice to get into a habit of doing it on pen and paper, keeping track of both you and your opponent's life total, because if you ever want to play a more competitive game of Magic, then that is really the preferred way to do it, especially if there's some sort of discrepancy. A judge can come over and look at that. It's not as big of a deal, of course, in this casual tournament format, but maybe it's a good habit to start getting into. Also, you can use the paper to create makeshift tokens if you need to, or put counters, makeshift counters on cards, stuff like that. Another thing I'd bring are some extra dice. You don't need a ton of dice or anything like that, but a couple things. The spin down die that you get, even if you use it to keep track of your life, that's fine, but it's really a faux pas to use that to roll to see who goes first because it's not randomized. So you may want to pick up a couple randomized dice, regular dice in other words, to roll to see who goes first. Also, they're nice to have to keep track of different things in the game like +1/+1 counters. Sleeves for your cards. I really endorse sleeves when you're playing at a game store, and I realize not everyone cares about the value of the cards, that you might just be playing to have fun, but sometimes you get something valuable, and if you want to play with it, and at the end of the day, maybe you want to trade it or sell it back to the store, try to keep it in good condition, and card sleeves are going to help with that cause, right? So here's the thing though with sleeves. If one breaks, then you're going to want to have backups. So you probably want like about 50 sleeves that all match, are the same color, look the same, don't show any wear, that you can bring with you. And if you only bring 40 and one breaks, then you're stuck either not using sleeves or perhaps having to buy sleeves there. And again, that can be avoided by just bringing some extra ones. Some people actually like to pre-sleeve some lands and bring those with you too. Now, you don't have to bring basic lands. They will be provided by the stores. Game stores will have them for the event. But it does save you time. And if you want to make full use of your deck construction time limit, then having some pre-sleeved lands that you bring with you ahead of time is a good idea, because when you go and get them at the store, you'll probably have to wait in line for a minute, and then you have to go dig through and find the lands. But if they're already done for you, then wonderful. They're already sleeved up, ready to go. So 10 of each is probably good enough. I mean, if you're really nervous, I don't really see someone playing a monocolor sealed deck, but if you're really nervous about it, you can do 17 of each. That should be more than enough, but I think 10 is just fine. And beyond that, another deck box isn't a bad idea. I mean, your pre-release kit is a deck box. It's a little flimsy, but it'll at least last you the day. But if you're playing in multiple events, or maybe you have cards you want to put aside for trade purposes, you can either bring a deck box or maybe a trade binder, something that will go into your backpack that will keep the cards protected if they bounce around in there, basically. A few other things, too, I would mention. Water. Bottled water is good to have. Some stores will sell that stuff, but again, it might be expensive there, and sometimes they don't sell water. Sometimes they sell soda and stuff like that, and that might not be what you want. Also, a snack is a good idea. These tournaments can go 4 or 5 rounds. Some will go longer. It depends on the format that your store is using. So most of the time it's 4 rounds. I've seen many 5-round tournaments, but every once in a while someone will do something bigger and maybe have a bigger prize payout and stuff like that. So with that being said, bring a snack, whether it's a granola bar or protein bar or something like that you can eat. Again, they sell stuff at stores typically, but sometimes it's just candy bars and Mountain Dew. Maybe you don't want that. So I think that's a good start to just get you ready, and I think that's basically all you need. You don't need to bring your whole house with you, right? This should be a quick tournament, only lasting about 4 or 5 hours on average, at least most of the time. Again, like I said, there are different formats that you could encounter. Some stores will also run 2-headed giant formats, and in those cases you do need a partner. So check ahead of time with your store as to what their format looks like, the times of their pre-release, and sometimes it's good to pre-register too, because certain stores will have a limited amount of spots, and pre-registering will help you guarantee a spot in that tournament. Alright, here's your pre-release kit that you'll be getting. I mentioned you get the spin down die. You're going to get the deck box. That's what everything comes in that you see there on the right side of the screen. You're also going to get 6 packs of Ixalan, and you're going to get a promo card. It's going to be a date-stamped foil card, and it could be one of any rare or mythic in the set. You are allowed to play with that card. So yes, it is kind of like an extra card, but it is legal to put that in your deck. So between your 6 packs and your extra card, that's what you have to play with. Alright, let's move on to the mechanics of Ixalan. Now, Ixalan itself is a tribal set. You're going to find vampires, pirates, merfolk, and dinosaurs. But aside from just the tribes, there's other mechanics. Some are new, some are returning. And these are the ones you'll want to be aware of. The first one is Enrage. Now, this is tied in with the dinosaurs. But what Enrage does is when your creature takes damage, you get some sort of benefit from it. Now, the example you see on the screen here says that when this takes damage, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. So that could be damage in combat, it could be a direct damage spell your opponent hits it with, it could be a damage spell you hit it with even. But anytime it takes damage, you'll get that benefit. Now, Enrage cards will have different benefits. That's the example for this one, but sometimes they'll have you draw a card. Sometimes they'll give +1/+1 just to that particular creature. Sometimes they'll let you search for a land. So there's all sorts of different things. Just read them carefully. Now, one thing I do want to point out, because this is something that will definitely come up, I have no doubt. If you attack with an enraged creature and it is blocked by 2 creatures, under normal circumstances, the damage will happen at the same time, which means the enrage will only trigger once. So even though 2 creatures are blocking it, the enrage will only happen one time. So you do want to remember that when it comes to combat. Next, we'll talk about treasure tokens. Now, these are tied in tightly with the pirates, but this is a artifact token, and it has the ability to tap, sacrifice this artifact, and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. There are a variety of ways that cards will generate these. Sometimes a creature will enter the battlefield, you'll get 1. Other times you can actually pay mana to get 1. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. So why do you want to use these tokens? Well, they do a few things for you. There are some cards in the set where number of artifacts on the battlefield matters. These do count as artifacts. Also, of course, they can be tapped and sacrificed for mana of any color. They can fix your mana if you're short on a color that you need, or they can help you ramp into something bigger, like a big old dinosaur, if that's at the top of your curve. And also, there's cards that have payouts for these. Sometimes you can sacrifice these to a certain card to allow you to draw more cards. There's even a card that lets you win the game if you have a certain amount of these in play. So there's a lot of different payouts for these treasures as well. Next we have Explore, and this is sprinkled throughout this set, but it could be a very powerful mechanic. It's a little reminiscent of Scry, but even with more upside. So in the example you see on the screen here, when this creature enters the battlefield, you get to explore. You reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, you get to put it in your hand. So it's a nice way to draw a card, smooth out your draws, get through your lands, make sure you hit your land drops. But if it is not a land, this will get a +1/+1 counter, and you have a choice. You can either keep that card on top of the library, or you can put it in your graveyard. So if it's a card you want to draw, leave it there. If maybe you don't want to draw it, or perhaps there's more use going to your graveyard than drawing it, and that will happen sometimes with some light graveyard interactions you'll find in the set, then throw it in the graveyard. So it gives you a lot of choice, a lot of decision making, and those tend to be good cards. So I do think this is going to be a very strong mechanic. Next is Raid. This is a recurring mechanic, and it again is tied in with the pirate tribe. Now, this rewards you for being aggressive and attacking. Basically, if something attacked this turn, and then you play a card with Raid on it, you get an extra ability. In this case, when this enters the battlefield, if you attacked with a creature this turn, it will deal 2 damage to target creature or player. Now again, raid outputs are all different, so you could see different things happen, but they all share the same quality that they want you to attack. I like this mechanic a lot because it helps to teach new players that most of the time, the right play is to attack before you play anything. So in other words, many times you don't play anything on your first main phase, you attack and then play your cards, maybe your creature or what have you on your second main phase. The reason that's good is because it lets your opponent know that you could have a combat trick. It keeps your mana untapped so that they have to think a little bit harder about their blocks and what they decide to do in combat. Now, beyond that, there are, of course, exceptions to that rule. Maybe you have a haste creature or maybe a direct damage spell. You need to get something out of the way so you can attack. So it's not 100%, obviously, but this does reinforce good behavior, and it's a very good and fun mechanic. Alright, vehicles are back. So if you played Kaladesh block, you're probably pretty familiar with vehicles, but a couple points that you should realize about them in case you're not familiar with the cards. They are artifacts that can be turned into artifact creatures if you pay the crew cost. Now, the crew cost can be different for different cards. The example on the screen you see is 2. So what that means is I can tap any number of creatures that I control with a total power of 2 or more, and if I do that, this will become an artifact creature till end of turn. Now, that could be 2 1/1s that I tap, or maybe just a 2/2 I tap, and that will activate this card. Now, like I said, there's different crew costs. Sometimes you'll see 3, sometimes you'll see 4. So it just depends on the particular card. Now, a couple other things to remember. When this enters the battlefield, even though it's coming in as an artifact, it is not a creature until I activate it. So you can't play a destroy target creature spell on it until it's activated as a creature. So you want to be careful and not make that mistake. Also, too, it does have summoning sickness, so the turn I play it, I cannot attack with it, even if I do pay the crew cost. However, if I play this card and then on my next turn I play a 2/2 creature, that 2/2 creature might have summoning sickness, but I can still tap that creature to crew the vehicle, even though I wouldn't be able to tap the creature to attack. So keep that in mind. It does make these cards much, much more efficient. Next, we have transform cards, and they're back. They're a little different this time. They all transform into non-basic lands, and many of these lands are homages or new takes on some of the most powerful lands in Magic, things like Gaia's Cradle, Maze of Ith, Diamond Valley, among others. So the one you see on the screen here is a take on Lotus Val, actually. But pay attention to these cards. They're all very different. The example you see on the screen will allow you to transform the card if you can equip this on a creature and then do combat damage to a player with the creature. At that point, you have the choice to transform if you want to, but you don't have to. That is different on different cards. If you see the words may, then you don't have to. But if it doesn't say may, you have to do it. So keep that in mind. Also, keep in mind some of these are legendary, some of these are not legendary. So they all play very differently. Just read the card very carefully, but there's a lot of potential upside to these cards. Finally, this isn't really a new mechanic or anything, but it is a rules change that starts with the Ixalan set, so I thought it was worth pointing out. Planeswalkers, you may notice it says Legendary Planeswalker here on Jace, Khun, and Castaway. Going forward and retroactively, even for Planeswalkers that have already been printed, they are all going to be considered Legendary Planeswalkers once Ixalan is released. So what does that mean? Basically, any card that interacts with a Legendary permanent will now interact with Planeswalkers. So that does change a lot of things, especially for like the world of Commander and such. Now, it also means there's a rules change when it comes to the uniqueness rule of Planeswalkers. So you may remember that you can't play 2 Jaces, even if they're different Jaces, at the same time under the old rules. So for example, if I had Jace the Mind Sculptor in play and I tried to play this, I would have to choose one of the 2 and sacrifice one or the other. Well, that is now changing. I can now play 2 different Jaces. So Jace the Mind Sculptor and Jace, Khun, and Castaway can both be on my side of the battlefield at the same time. It's just fine. But what I can't do is I can't play 2 of the same Jaces. So 2 Jace the Mind Sculptors, I would, like I used to in the old days, I would still have to choose one and sacrifice one. So that doesn't change, but it does allow you to play multiple versions anyway of the same character now at the same time. All right, let's talk about some archetypes. Now, when you're playing sealed pools can be a little bit restrictive. So you're not going to necessarily have like the perfect tribal deck most of the time, right? If you draft, you have a better chance of doing that. But I still think it's important to talk about archetypes because even if you don't have an all-in like perfect deck for sealed that is consistently part of a certain archetype, it is still good to know what the archetypes are and what kind of synergies exist between different cards while you're making your decisions and you're looking for things in a big seal pool, especially if you've never seen these cards before. So I do want to go over these, but like I said, complete archetypes might play more of a role in the draft game, even more so than the seal game. All right, let's start by looking at the tribal archetypes. We're going to begin with vampires. Vampires can be found in white and black, and they have a actually kind of fun game plan. They're all about overwhelming your opponent and gaining you a lot of life, right? Okay, so you're going to find a lot of lifelink vampires. A lot of small tokens like 1/1 lifelink vampires will be generated by a lot of cards. And the whole idea is you gain life and keep ahead of your opponent life-wise. And then there's cards like the one you see on the screen here that actually will take you that extra life and give you something for it. So sometimes a creature will be temporarily buffed, or you might be able to pay in for another resource and convert your life to something else. And that can be quite powerful as long as you have the life to give. And even if you don't have a lot of excess life, that can still be a powerful effect if you have some life, because as long as you stay at least one life, you can still win the game, right? So if paying life is going to help you get there, a lot of times that is a very powerful mechanic. Now, aside from that, you're also going to find some vampires that are going to drain life from your opponent, like the one you see on the right side of your screen. So ultimately, that's their goal. Okay, dinosaurs, they fall under 3 colors, what we call the Naya colors, and that's white, red, and green. Now, these are some big creatures. Of course, Enrage, we talked about it as part of their strategy. One thing I will warn about dinosaurs, there's a lot of good ones that cost some mana, right? So you don't want to overdo it when it comes to building your deck, because when you build a 40-card sealed deck, typically you want to be pretty creature-centric, which means you want anywhere between 14 and 17 creatures usually, but you also want to make sure you stay on curve. And what I mean by that is you still want a lot of good 2-drops and some 3-drops, a few 4-drops, and maybe then a couple 5-drops. Once you start talking about 6, 7, 8 casting cost cards, you want to be really, really restricted there. Probably thinking of no more than just a couple of those. You don't want to overdo it, or else you get a lot of cards stuck in your hand that you can't play early on, and that leads to a loss. So be really careful about the top end of your curve. And I say that with dinosaurs because dinosaurs tend to have a lot of really good big creatures, and you may have a decision to make. You might have to cut a creature that you want to play just because you just can't have too many in your deck. Also, since we're talking about curve, mana ramping for dinosaurs is also a good idea. If you can find some like cards that are creatures that will give you some mana, or else a card that lets you search for a land to put into play tap, things of that nature. Treasure chest are another good example. Things that will help you get there. Now, land-wise, a lot of decks will typically run 17 lands, but if you have a really heavy casting cost deck for some reason, you might even think about running 18 lands. I mean, 16 to 17 would be fine typically. 17 is usually the average when it comes to that. So just a few things to keep in mind, especially when you're trying to build around dinosaurs. All right, next we have merfolk, and they're a very kind of elusive tribe. They're doing some weird things. Sometimes they're unblockable, or they can provide conditions where other creatures are unblockable, like you see on the left side here. Other times they're just giving +1/+1 counters to each other or to themselves. They're just kind of being evasive and tricky and trying to get in for damage when and where they can. So this is a change to what the merfolk tribe has been in the past, where they've been very dependent on island walk, and that ability has kind of been phased out in recent days of Magic. So they're trying to find something that's still elusive, like the unblockable qualities of some of these merfolk, but don't fall under a land walk ability. So it actually feels like a really fun tribe to play, but it is a little more cerebral. You'll definitely find it probably harder to navigate than maybe some of the other decks, like the dinosaur deck, for example. Next we have pirates, and they fall under 3 colors, the Grixis colors, blue, black, and red. And there's actually a lot of different things going on with pirates. I mean, you have some that are flying, like you see on the left side here. You have many that are worried about treasure, like you see in the middle. And then you also have the raid mechanic going on, like you see on the right. So they are generally pretty aggressive. It's an aggressive tribe, but there's a lot going on. It's just not simply get in the red zone and attack all the time. All right, let's say you can't get one of these 4 main tribes in your seal pool to really gel together. What other things can you do? Well, there's a few other options you can look for. Flyers. Just look for a bunch of flyers. Favorable Winds is a great reprint. You see that in the middle of the screen at Uncommon. And you can get a whole bunch of flyers that have nothing to do with each other, and that could actually be a good deck, and you could get a lot of wins doing something like that while your opponent's trying to do something more complicated sometimes. So that's something to look for. Another thing is just sort of weird interactions that maybe aren't apparent at the very beginning, but as you get into your seal pool, you start to think, you know what, maybe this isn't a bad idea. Belligerent Brontodon, for example. It makes it so each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power, which means when this attacks in, it will actually do 6 damage, not 4, because it has 6 toughness. Check out the forecasting cost card on your left. 1/7, but if the Brontodon is in play, it's actually doing 7 damage instead of 1. That's a pretty good swing. Now, this could be a little bit of a janky combo, right? But there are a lot of green and white cards that have higher toughness than power. So if you have a whole bunch of those in your pool and you happen to also have a couple of these Brontodons in your pool, that might be a deck. Another way to go is just simple aggro. Just go aggro. There's a lot of cards that are conducive to that in a lot of different colors, and there's a couple examples here that are great aggro cards where you can try to beat your opponent and race them, basically. Just put down fast creatures that have first strike, things like the card on your right that will prevent life gain so they can't recoup the damage they lose early on in the game, in the mid-game to late game, things of that nature. So these are just a few suggestions. There's actually a lot of different ways you could go. And with that being said, that's our information for today, and I hope that's helpful to you, especially if you're just looking for a quick video to watch before you go to your pre-release or maybe your first pre-release. Let me know in the comments below, really, how everything goes this weekend. I love to hear that, like what kind of crazy pulls you get, like what promo cards you got, also how you did, what's your record. And ultimately, the thing to remember is, this is all about having fun. This isn't a serious competitive tournament like a Grand Prix or something like that. This is about being relaxed, having fun, playing with the new cards for the first time. If you're an experienced player, helping a new player learn the game. If you're a new player, learning from experienced players and meeting new people to perhaps play with other than just pre-release weekends, right? So that's what this is all about. Have fun, have a good time. Don't beat yourself up if you don't do well. That's how we learn, that's how we get better. But anyway, until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.